Hello and welcome to ScandiTech's iPhone 5C screen replacement video. In this video we'll walk you through how to replace your iPhone 5C screen, show you potential difficulties, and give general warnings. Please be aware that replacing internal iPhone parts is not a risk-free process, but with this video we'll do our best to prepare you for the task ahead. Please keep in mind that there are many tiny screws inside the iPhone, and most of them are of different lengths. Make sure to organize the screws as you remove them because they need to go back into their respective holes. If parts of this video aren't clear, please take a look at our website www.scandi.tech, Scandi.tech, where we have a text image guide with high definition pictures. We Scandi Tech sell our screens for iPhones in two different setups: the screen with the inner parts pre-assembled and just a standalone screen without inner parts. The inner parts consist of a front camera, ear speaker, and home button. If you purchase our screen without the inner parts, you can simply remove these parts from your current screen and install them on your new screen. To replace your iPhone 5C screen, you will be needing a Phillips size 00 screwdriver for the internal screws, a Pentalobe screwdriver for the bottom screws, a Spudger, and or a plastic opening tool, a set of tweezers, and preferably a suction cup. If you have purchased our full screen replacement kit, all of these tools will be included. Begin by turning off your iPhone. If your LCD or touchscreen isn't working, you can turn off the phone by holding the power button and the home button for about 7 seconds. If you hold too long, the phone will reboot and you will need to repeat this step. Once the phone is switched off, we'll remove the two bottom screws next to the charging port. Now we'll have to separate the front assembly from the back assembly. This step can be a bit difficult, especially if you're doing it for the first time. It's important to do it slowly and carefully. The front assembly is held tightly by the metal back assembly. The front assembly is connected to the motherboard with 3 cables in the top right corner, so we can only lift the screen to a 90-degree angle without damaging these cables. To separate the front assembly, apply the suction cup at the bottom part of the screen if your glass is intact. The suction cup needs a smooth surface. If your glass is broken, the suction cup might not latch on. In this case, you can either apply Scotch tape or a plastic film to the broken area to create a smooth surface. Once the suction cup is gripping the glass, pull it slowly and steadily to create an opening at the bottom of the screen, and sometimes the glass can come loose from its plastic frame. If this happens, we need to use a different technique to lift the screen. An alternative way to separate the front from the back is to insert one end of the tweezers between the plastic frame of the front assembly and the plastic back assembly. Then carefully lever the screen up. Insert the tweezers just to the right of the speaker holes. The phone's headphone jack connector is on the left side and could get damaged by the tweezers if you insert it too far to the left. Be aware that inserting the tweezers might leave a small mark on your back assembly. Let's insert the tweezers and carefully pry the screen up. Once you have a tiny opening, insert the plastic opening tool and slide it slowly down the sides of the phone. The plastic frame underneath the glass sometimes gets stuck to the back assembly and needs a bit of tinkering to get it loose. Use your tweezers to gently pry the frame free. We'll now lift the screen to a 90-degree angle. Keep holding it with one hand until we can safely remove it. Pay attention to the 3 cables connecting the screen to the motherboard. Make sure there's no tension on these cables or they could tear. You could also secure the screen against a solid object with a rubber band or have someone else hold it, but make sure there's no tension on these cables. These cables are controlling the LCD, touchscreen, and front camera with the application microphone and proximity sensor. If the cables tear, these parts will no longer work and will need to be replaced. We will now disconnect the battery. To do that, the battery connector's metal plate needs to be removed, then we can safely disconnect the connector. Go ahead and remove the Phillips 2 screws holding the metal plate. Use the tweezers to lift the metal plate and place it next to the screws. Once the metal plate is out of the way, disconnect the battery connector. Use your plastic spudger and come in from the right side and carefully lift up the connector. Make sure not to damage its socket underneath. We'll now move on to disconnecting the front screen's connectors. Begin by removing the metal shield. The top right screw is in most phones not magnetized, and you may need to assist with the tweezers to remove it. This screw is also longer than the other 3 screws holding the shield. It's crucial that this long screw is put back into the correct hole when reassembling the phone. The top left screw is a tiny bit longer than the bottom left and bottom right screw. Once again, make sure it's put back in its designated spot. Make sure you organize the screws as you remove them. If you put back the wrong screw in the wrong hole, it can damage the phone. Proceed to disconnect the front assembly's connectors. Use your plastic spudger for this step. We begin with the rightmost connector. Come in from the right side and gently pry the connector up by levering your spudger against the back assembly without putting pressure on any sensitive components. This is the front camera flex cable. This cable controls the front camera, ear speaker, the proximity sensor, and the application microphone, which is used when doing voice recordings, video recordings, or using various conversation apps such as Skype. Up next is the LCD connector. This connector only controls the LCD. Pry it up by levering against the metal shield without damaging any nearby components. Finally, we have the touchscreen connector. Disconnect this connector by resting your spudger on top of the flexes on the left side, then go in underneath the touchscreen connector. Now you have disconnected the screen from the phone. If your new screen comes pre-assembled with the inner parts like this screen, you simply have to connect it to the motherboard. We suggest skipping forward in this video and we'll show you the proper technique. For those of you who have not purchased a screen with the inner parts pre-assembled like this screen, we'll show you how to remove the parts from your original screen and install them onto your new front assembly. Before we continue, I'd like to say that when reconnecting the new screen, it's crucial to get the connectors perfectly aligned. If they are even slightly out of place, your new screen will either not show a picture or it will have visible bars or lines on the LCD. The touchscreen might also not react as it should if its connector is out of place. If you're experiencing any of these issues, please go back to this step, disconnect your front assembly, and then reconnect it carefully. It's important not to rush it or use too much force, as the sockets on the motherboard can be damaged. Once again, we'll show the correct technique to connect the screen further ahead in this video. Let's focus on removing the small parts from the old screen and installing them onto the new unit. We begin by removing the metal shield holding the ear speaker and the front camera. Make sure you keep your screws organized as they are also of different sizes. Once the screws are out, proceed by lifting off the metal shield, then the ear speaker. After the ear speaker, we remove the front camera flex. This part is sometimes held in place with soft glue and you need to come in under it with the tweezers and then pry it carefully up. Make sure that it doesn't tear. If there's a heat shield sticker on your front camera flex, try to remove it in one piece. This part is non-essential and does not necessarily have to be reinstalled. We'll now remove the LCD metal shield. It's held in place with 6 screws, 1 at the top, 2 on each long side, and 1 at the bottom. The 4 screws on the long sides are of the same size, but the top and bottom screws are both of different lengths. Remove all of the screws and organize them. Once the screws are out, the LCD metal plate can be lifted off. If it's stuck, insert the tweezers between the metal rail and the LCD plate. Finally, we remove the home button's metal shield, then the home button flex, and the plastic home button. The flex is glued to the metal shield, so you'll need to come in from the right with the tweezers, work it underneath the right part of the flex, and then lift up. The plastic button is easily removed by pressing it with your fingers from the front side. The outer edges of the home button's rubber gasket have soft adhesive to keep the button in place. Try not to touch this area as it will soften the adhesive. All the inner parts are now stripped from the old screen. Let's install them on the new screen in a similar fashion as we removed them. We begin with the home button and its metal shield. If there's a film on your new screen, remove it. Grab the home button and put it in position. Flip the screen to make sure the home button square is aligned well. If not, adjust or remove the home button, then put it back in place until you're satisfied. The placement of the square has no effect on the functionality of the button. This is only a visual feature. Put the home button flex with the metal shield on top of the plastic button and screw it fastened. Make sure the home button's flex is flat against the plastic frame. Flip your screen again and press the home button a couple of times. Confirm that it reacts well and doesn't get stuck. After the home button, it's time to put the LCD metal shield back in place. Align the hole at the bottom part of the shield with the frame. If the metal shield doesn't fall in place right away, assist with the tweezers to get in between the metal rails on the side of the screen. Put the screws back. The top and bottom screws are slightly longer than the screws on the sides. Now we'll install the front camera flex. This part can be difficult to get in place and it doesn't always stick to the plastic frame. Begin with the application mic by pressing it into its rubber holder. Fold the rest of the flex on top of it. There are two small holes on the top right part of the flex which should fall on top of the two pins sticking up from the frame. If your sticker is intact, attach it to the metal shield. Assemble the ear speaker on top of the front camera flex. Make sure the ear speaker's little springs are in contact with the front camera flex. The ear speaker's screw hole should fall right on top of the screw hole on the metal shield. Grab the metal shield and place it on top of the ear speaker. Secure the metal shield with the two screws. The shortest screw goes in the bottom right hole and the longest in the top left. We now have a fully assembled screen with all the inner parts installed. We can go ahead and connect it to the phone. If you ordered the screen with the inner parts pre-assembled, this is how your screen will come right out of the box. Now comes the most delicate part of the replacement process. The new screen's connectors needs to be connected to their respective sockets on the motherboard. The connectors are fragile and can tear, therefore they should be handled with great care. If the flex cable tears or if the connectors get damaged, the screen will no longer work and needs to be replaced. We obviously want to avoid this, so take your time during the next steps. If the sockets on the motherboard get damaged, it's even worse. These sockets are difficult to replace even for skilled repair shops. Be careful and move slowly without applying too much force. Align the screen's first connector, which controls the touch screen, and connect it to the motherboard. Begin pressing the connector from one end, then slide your finger across it until it's fully connected. This step can be difficult to master and may take several attempts until you get it right. When the connector attaches to its socket, a soft click is heard. Slide your finger across it once again to make sure it's connected all the way. Sometimes the connector feels like it's connected, even though it's slightly out of place. If you're experiencing touch issues once you have started your phone, go back to this step and disconnect, then reconnect the touch screen connector. Next up is the LCD connector. Connect it the same way as you just did with the touchscreen connector. The LCD connector is a bit smaller and usually easier to attach than the previous connector. Once again, a soft click noise is heard when the connector latches onto its socket. Finally, we connect the front camera connector. This is the rightmost connector of the three. Try to align it with its socket, then carefully press it down. As with the previous two connectors, it can be challenging getting it in place and connecting it to the phone. Keep trying until it snaps into place. Put the metal cover in place and fasten its screws. Make sure you put the longest screw in the top right hole, the second longest in the top left hole, and the two shortest screws in the bottom two holes. Connect the batteries connector to the phone. Screw fasten the battery connector's metal shield with its two screws. Now we can start the phone to make sure that the screen, the touch, and the front camera are all working. You may let the front assembly rest on top of the back assembly without pressing them together while you test the screen. Just make sure there's no tension on the cables. Go ahead and start the phone. Once the phone has booted up, move your fingers across the screen to make sure the touch works well. If everything is in order, switch off your phone and continue with the repair. If the LCD, touch, or front camera aren't working as they should, go back a few steps and disconnect, then reconnect the front assembly connectors. Finally, we'll assemble the front assembly with the back assembly. The front assembly's top side has small hooks which need to latch onto the back assembly. Hold the top of the front assembly adjacent to the top of the back assembly while gently pressing them together. Then lower the front assembly. When the plastic frame of the front assembly is aligned with the back assembly, press them carefully together from top to bottom. If your phone has been dropped, the back assembly can be a bit skewed and it may make it a little bit more challenging to assemble the phone. Keep in mind that you're dealing with a part that is made out of glass and you can only bend it so much. If the part appears to be stuck, lift it to a 90-degree angle and try again. The small notches on the side will snap into the back assembly as you go along. You may assist with the tweezers. Once both sides and the bottom part of the screen are secured into the back assembly, we only have two screws left. The bottom screws are of the same size and they have a pentalobe head. Pick them up with your fingers, the tweezers, or use the magnetic screwdriver. Use the small Pentalobe screwdriver to fasten them. Your phone should now be in one piece with a new screen. Sometimes the time and date are restored to factory default and needs to be adjusted. The best way of doing so is to let your phone connect to a Wi-Fi network, and it will automatically synchronize the time and date if you have the setting enabled. If you're having trouble with any of the steps in this video, please go to our website www.scandi.tech and read our text image guide. This text image guide shows the entire process from a slightly different angle. We at ScandiTech hope the repair has been successful and that your new screen is working well. Thank you and goodbye.